How you doing, folks? Welcome to episode 44 of the Simpa Life Podcast. I am not joined this evening by Maka, so this may be a slightly different format, guys. So we're not going to crash the car at the start. Hopefully, we're not going to crash at all with this recording, but we will jump straight into introducing tonight's guests. They are sorry, let me try that one again. We're joined by the member director and the process and legal member director of Hempen. They are Patrick and Zena. How are you doing, guys?
Yeah, doing really well, thanks.
Yeah, good. It's been a long work day, but doing well.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for joining me. I don't know if you noticed that I kind of cut my intro short there. There's actually 3 or 4 of the sentences of notes there, but we're going to jump straight in. I'm sure we'll circle back with that in questions later on. So I suppose, firstly, a lot of people may have heard of Hempen, may very well have heard of, obviously, the controversy that occurred sort of in 2009, where you had your license and unfairly, I would say, massively removed. But for the people that don't know, you could give a brief sort of overview of who Hempen are?
Yeah, so Hempen, we started in 2015, and we've sort of inadvertently become pioneers in the UK hemp industry in terms of growing and producing hemp products. We're a not-for-profit cooperative, so we're all about the mission. This is not, obviously we have to be commercially viable, but we're not in it for the money, and certainly if we were, we would be doing very badly at that. We're all about promoting hemp as a solution to our individual, community and planetary health crises. And our mission is to cooperatively cultivate hemp for the benefit of people, community, and planet.
So we're based down in South Oxfordshire on the Hardwick estate, and we've got a little cottage here. We've got a few fields. We used to lease fields off the estate to grow hemp, and that was really like the beginning of the journey. Was an idea to grow hemp in order to create a rural sustainable livelihood, and also make the plant accessible to everyone, to reap all the benefits of the plant for everyone. And that kind of, we started off doing food products, seeds and that kind of thing, and then CBD became legal, and so we thought, well, let's have a go at the old CBD as well, and that's when things really started to kick off for Hempen, because we were the most local UK organic source of CBD, it's been a journey from that point.
Mm. And I guess something that listeners might not know is that one of the key motivations for us in forming Hempen in the first place was, how do we build rural resilient community as well? And that was a question that we were asking. Certainly, myself and Joe McGann, who's really the visionary of Hempen, were discussing prior to forming Hempen. The question was, how do we build rural resilient community in the face of these environmental and social and economic challenges? And hemp was one of the answers to that question. Hemp was one of the answers to how we build community. Hemp is the community plant. It's the people's plant. From one plant, you can do so many things, whether it's feed yourself, medicine, clothing, housing, all the biocomposites, it's all there, right? And so once Joe convinced me that was true, and that wasn't just something that my stoner friends at university told me about, because that's honestly what I used to think. I used to think, yeah, I'm all for legalizing cannabis, like that's a no-brainer, but don't tell me it can also build me a house and feed me and clothe me and create ecological batteries. Like that's a bit far-fetched. But Joe convinced me that actually those things were true. and that's when I got on board with the Hempen vision.
Yeah, beautiful. Most of the examples you spoke of there are sat here. We've got graphene infused sort of hemp paper, your thermal blocks, you got concrete, you got plastic molds. Got one of my favorites is a little Lego brick. A little printed Lego brick. That's one of the things that sentence there, you have how to protect sort of in future-proof rural communities. And I think that is something that I hadn't quite considered. I've become massively aware, especially during this sort of lockdown and COVID, of my own internalized classism. And so part of that is then the blinkers. If I can only see the economically deprived in my area, but there are people that are economically deprived in all areas, and it presents in different ways in different parts of the country and in different communities. And I think that, it's the same. It's the same that occurs whether it is incentivizing sort of failing agricultural farms to move into the production of agricultural crops of low THC cannabis or hemp, or whether it is then kids in housing estates putting tents in the mum's bedroom. If you look at it from a zoomed out enough picture, it's the same thing. It's people trying to future-proof their economies. They're growing a resource that they are then extracting into a product or a service that they're then providing to a community. So actually, in the way you said it, it was a very wonderful way of the image of coercion, of co-option, I suppose, in my head there, of people working cooperatively across the spectrum. So one of the main reasons that you guys have been on my list for a while to have on the podcast is that you speak so eloquently and so wonderfully of the industrial and commercial potential of, again, for my listeners here, I'm going to, every time these guys say hemp, say low THC cannabis, I'm not doing this to be derisive or derisional. I'm doing it almost, I suppose, plant a seed in your head as well. And we'll end up talking about the nomenclature and the roots of the different words sort of later on. But I just want to start.
That's absolutely right. We totally, that's totally our position at Hempen as well. Hemp is just low THC cannabis, and the level of what that low means is just legally defined arbitrarily by some bureaucrats and politicians, and there's no other reason for it. It's not nature that's made that definition. It's us humans.
I mean, both versions have been selectively bred for different purposes and different uses. At the end of the day, it's been bred for high THC recreational use, and then it's been bred for low THC for industrial use. And it's all the same.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously the original split between what I suppose, if we look at the genus of cannabis and the current accepted consensus science, still a bit contentious if you look at the Soviet research where I think they got up to about 17 different subgenus. But if we discount that, we're basically up to, I think, cannabis sativa deriving from the West, acclimating still from indica roots, as it were, and then ruderalis being the I was going to say bastard cousin, as it were, the kind of in between. And it seems to be that these are expressions of the same genus of plant, just in different environments. So we know that cannabis is a massive adaptogen. You can put it anywhere and it reverts and it tackles. So even across a field, if there's then different waterway distributions, if there are different ways of the angle of the sun, even if one patch of it is cut by a tree in a distance, the plant itself will start to work a way to compensate for this. There is an intrinsic intelligence within it. And so I think that then, obviously, as it's come through, especially the East India Trade Company, and they were starting to move sort of back and forth, acclimation of what would have been at that point what we would understand to be cannabis indica, then kind of, made it more beneficial in terms of fibrous materials or whatever else, because we didn't have the idea of the intoxicant, the medical intoxicant, which is where we get sort of hashish in this from, is you're getting therapy and but you're also having a spiritual experience. And I think that we were still very much in the dark ages over here of you can only get to God through the church. You can't have that experience. And if you do, it's in some form sort of evil or wrong. And so I think that then created a cultural thing of keeping us away from the therapeutic benefits of it. And we know the THC protects the seeds, or it protects the plant as itself from UV light. Obviously, the different UV lights to the flatlands of the UK when it was then grown in this country as an agricultural crop will have meant, massive differences. And then at some point prohibition comes along and goes 0.2 of this one cannabinoid of over 100 of them. We're going to arbitrarily put it into that. And it's, those distinctions have meant that they look and almost act quite differently. But the difference between them, if we remove the THC cap, is potential yields, because actually if we rebred them into each other now, imagine if we bred back in some of these European accepted hemp strains, low THC, with some of the modern sort of street skunk, as it were, for the resin production, because we know the resin production protects the physical structure of the plant. So if they work synergistically, we can get everything from one. And this is one of the things that really annoyed me about the story of where you guys went from what you were doing to then how hard the system came at you, was because all you were doing was being economical. All you were doing was using logic and rationale to go, this produces this wonderful thing. You want us to destroy this because of a piece of paper that is unevidenced and makes no sense.
Yeah. I mean, I always find, my background's in activism. I was a social and environmental activist. I still would call myself that, but in a very overt way, from grassroots direct action of all kinds, taking that, around the sort of ecological catastrophe we're in. Some of that action was quite serious by some people's standards. I've been involved with banner drops off Parliament, shutting down short haul flight airports, all sorts, which a lot of people might find controversial, but that I'm just giving a flavour of where myself and Joe and some of the people that started Hempen were coming from, and what we wanted to do here, and what I've always believed in, is not just saying no, this is a bad thing, but actually offering a solution. What's your answer? What's your answer to the problem? So Hempen was our answer to a problem. Hempen and Hemp, cooperatively, not for profit, as a community, growing this wonderful plant was our answer to some of these problems. We wanted to posit a new paradigm, a new way of doing things, or be part of that, at least part of that conversation. And we didn't do anything that we would consider in any way controversial, especially by our previous standards, right? But actually, it's very telling when you do something like that. You create the threat of a good example, and then you're shut down. And you're shut down in a very draconian way using the full force of the law. We're partnered with the farm here, and his name's James. He's a wonderful man. He's an ecologist. He's got the most amazing heart, and we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. When he finally had was told he had his license revoked, which was our license at the time, we were farming together. He was saying, look, now I've got 40 acres of cannabis in the field, and legal advice is that's a charge for cultivation of 40 acres of cannabis. And he was 60 years old. He didn't think he'd survive the trial, frankly. And so he said, look, we're going to have to cut it down. And we agreed, you're going to have to cut it down. But if it wasn't for that, we would have made them come and cut it down, because what's wrong with a plant that the World Health Organization says has no public health risk, growing 40 acres of it, as tall as our head, producing products that we've shown are A, legal, and B, healthy, and have no side effects in any problematic way, only have benefits: improved biodiversity, improved soil, sequestering carbon, and the rest. Why should we cut down this plant for any other reason other than you're threatening us with imprisonment if we don't? So if it wasn't for James, feeling he wouldn't survive the trial, we might have made them come and cut it down, and we might have stood in the way and done all of that. But as it is, we couldn't do that at the time. And so we decided to cut it down, publicize it, and campaigns for organic hemp farmers, to licensed hemp farmers, to be able to harvest the whole plant. Meanwhile, we had to then import CBD as instructed by them from abroad. So just, our next license application would have involved our license application that year in 2019 would have involved us harvesting seed, harvesting straw, and destroying the flowers, destroying the most lucrative part of our plant. Worth hundreds of thousands. Actually, that was 2.4 million worth of CBD in that crop that we destroyed. Now, we knew we had a market for a lot of that because we were already selling CBD products, and it was getting more and more popular, growing faster and faster each year. So we literally had to take that money and send it abroad to regimes like Switzerland, Germany, like other places where they had more sensible hemp licensing policies and supportive policies, and send our money there. Meanwhile, we're destroying the exact same product in our own field. That was the British policy. That was UK policy. So that was a ridiculousness of that situation. But to be honest with you, where we've got to today is a position closer to our own hearts. We don't think there should be any licensing of industrial hemp. If the World Health Organization says there is no public health risk for industrial hemp, and therefore it should not be a controlled substance internationally, and the UN also says industrial hemp cultivated for industrial or horticultural purposes should be exempt from any licensing control, then why does it still need a license in the UK, and why are you treated as a criminal under the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971 for growing that plant? You know, leaving aside all discussions about whether it can get you high and all that stuff, because we know hemp can't get you high, so you don't even have to talk about that. So our position has now moved round to, and it always was, to be honest, not reform, but actually like essentially revolution. Scrap the licensing regime, overgrow the regime, grow hemp, render it redundant, and let's all get on with reaping the benefits for ourselves, for our health, for our communities, and for the planet.
And I mean, the beautiful thing about having to cut that crop down was the fact that it drew so much attention to the hypocrisy of it all, because people were up in arms about it, because it's really shedding light on how the licensing isn't serving anyone. In actual fact, it's just creating a barrier between us and actually trying to heal the planet, in terms of ecology, in terms of biodiversity, in terms of all the potential of hemp is just being stifled because we can't actually grow it freely, and therefore we can't research it freely. It's not in abundance for us to bring all these ideas and potentials to light. So yeah, it's useless.
Can I just do you have a dog in the room by any chance?
No, not anymore.
We did though.
All right. I can hear it sounded like a squeaky toy, not quite squeaking, or like a dog snoozing.
It could be my chair. I think it's my chair.
All right. So when you were talking before about, I was trying to keep a stern face going, yeah, I agree. It's shit that's happened, but I was hearing the squeaking, and all I could see in my head was like a cartoon dog slowly sort of compressing down on a squeaky bone. That's exactly the place that I want everyone to be honest with you, is to arrive to a point of revolution, is to recognize that we exactly that, to borrow quite an older generational phrase of to overgrow. And I think that it starts with a recognition from, I don't want to say your side of the fence, because I don't want there to be a fence. I don't want us to be in separate goddamn fields. But what I mean by that is you're very much within the hemp industry, because you are agriculturalists, you are farmers, you are, with your history, your passion, and your trajectory, you are on the right path. And this is something that I kind of rebelled against for many years, because I felt that it diluted the conversation, when actually it doesn't. It builds it. So in the same way that a rope is made of strings that are twined together to create its tensile strength, that is what is true here. That if we have a strong industrial hemp sector, or industrial OTC cannabis, whatever you want to refer to it as, if we have a robust and actually open source therapeutic and wellness and adult consumption, we have everything across the board, because then the communication, the passing back and forth of new discoveries, of potential technological applications, I think would then move us forward more in 10 years than we have in 100 years, especially the past 100 years of prohibition. So I think that it's brilliant to see you guys calling for this. But I mean, what can be done, I suppose, in real terms of actually boots on the ground, as it were, of people actually putting seed to soil?
Well, exactly. I mean, this is the beauty of it. It couldn't be simpler, right? So all anyone needs to do is get hold of some hemp seeds, plant them in their garden or in their field or in their window box or on their narrow boat, whatever it is, and sign up and say, my name is Joe Bloggs and this is my hemp, and I'm growing my hemp for whatever reason you're growing your hemp, if it's to harvest for your own CBD needs, or if it's because you want the seeds, or is it because you're a farmer and you think it's just an incredible agricultural crop that's going to help you in a difficult time for farmers. Just be loud and be proud. We'll all stand together, and any flack that anyone gets legally or in the media or in whatever way, we'll be one collective in solidarity, and we'll all support each other. We'll get lawyers and lay legal experts and render the licensing regime redundant. And every single person that does that makes it much more powerful. So it doesn't really even matter how much hemp we grow. It'd be great to grow hundreds, thousands of acres of hemp, but it's actually more about each person standing up and being counted, because each person is a potential court case, and each court case is an opportunity for us to stand up in a public court of record, if it even gets that far, which I doubt it will, because which police force in the country wants to be taking people to court for this, when it's got probably much more important things to do. But each court of record, each court case is a court of record. And in each court of record, the government, the Crown Prosecution Service, will have to justify, not just legally, but to some degree ethically and morally, why they're prosecuting someone for growing a plant which has no public health threat.
The issue that they're going to draw back to is, without the license, it's cannabis. Under MODA, it's cannabis. It's expressions of its genetics in terms of terpenes, flavonoids, cannabinoids are irrelevant. It is of the genus cannabis. So my question, I suppose, would be, and this is again, as I kind of mentioned off camera earlier, as to one of the reasons why I started this project, is to try to find unity, is to find commonality. And I think there is something in your call there, because effectively those hemp farmers would then be liable for the same cultivation charge that somebody would for growing high THC or any non-low THC variety of cannabis. So with that said, are you aware of the work of Outlaw?
Yes, definitely.
So Outlaw's having some...
It's really inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
So what I was going to say is the nullification of certain charges, his legal prosecution service will actually be live now, folks. Do check it out, Outlaw Legal Services. It will be live by the time you folks are hearing this. And what he's looking to do is basically they're weaponizing a sub-series of precedents that they've got to get people off possession cultivation charges. So I can see that there should then be, again, I'm all for the big tent now. Before I was like, nah, we're all just camping. Now it's like, nah, big tent or nothing is the way we move forward with this. So I can see that there is then potential for a nullification of a hemp charge through the same sort of mechanism. And what their legal services are basically doing is empowering people to stand litigant in person. And once you stand litigant in person, you are not upholding to your solicitor's advice, and they're upholding to the bar. They can't challenge the law. We as individuals can. So exactly what you're saying about creating that community is already kind of being built in one facet for adult consumption. So I think that there are definitely some conversations to be had there to find ways to amicably support each other. It isn't a case of one or the other, because the same conversation, if it is a violation of a cultivation charge of Schedule 1 Class B under MODA 1971 for cannabis or hemp, if then the government are forced to look into it and do it, they would then look into it and then effectively find that there is no difference other than the arbitrary distinction of one cannabinoid that we put on the plant. And then, so I think that actually you guys going alone or you guys going with everyone else, if it succeeds, it still leads to the same outcome, which is the freedom of the plant ubiquitously. Because then the argument is, if they allow hemp without license, they're only saying that, okay, THC is the problem here. So then we'd end up having to reshape and readdress how licensing looks for a certain cannabinoid. And then if you raid somebody's house and they've then got 4 or 5 week old cannabis, can you tell me that you're going to be able to tell me how that's going to express without actually growing, cultivating it out? So we're in a very unique position, I think, where I definitely want to, behind the scenes, as it were, put some people in contact with you guys if it'd be all right to see what can be done, because there are a lot of people in the legal sector really interested right now in just going hell for leather, because it's not only is it wrong, it's illegal under their own distinction of the law. So we're just trying to push for precedent. So there's people going down the medical route, people going down the adult cultivation, possession, etc. So yeah, I think anything we can do to sharpen a third prong on this would be very good.
I think we've got to go from all angles. But the biggest lesson I ever learned in activism is focus on your common purpose. Don't spend time fighting laterally. Focus on what you want together, and if you're all pushing the same direction, you'll achieve it quicker. And on this, I think we're pushing at an open door. I think the zeitgeist on a global level is opening up. Right, and our piece of the puzzle is what people call industrial hemp, and that's because we want to talk about it for its industrial purposes, and we think that that's a no-brainer, and so movement on that piece of the puzzle will help things shift in other areas as well. Of course, I'll speak for myself. Zena, Zena will say what she thinks, but of course, the criminalization of cannabis is ridiculous. I don't believe in that at all personally. However, I haven't made the whole of cannabis my personal fight. However, I've wanted to create an alternative paradigm for the world that was the thing that I really believed in. Rural, resilient community, cooperatively looking after each other, their communities and the planet in a healthy and holistic way. And I've been criminalized for that. Hempen's been criminalized for that. James, our farmer, has been criminalized for that. And actually, that's pushing us into a corner and saying, for us to say, look, your distinctions are completely arbitrary. They're not even justified by your own terms. You've pushed us into the corner. We were willing to play the game. We were willing to apply for your licenses. However, you're so corrupt that even that is not possible when a not-for-profit cooperative can't get a license to grow hemp despite doing nothing but goodness in the world. Then you've pushed us into a corner where we have to say, right, it's revolution. Your regime is not fit for purpose. It's corrupt, and we're not going to give it any attention anymore. We're not going to give it any energy. Mm-hmm. So we're going to do what we want to do. If you want to come for us, and we'll stand together.
Yeah. So yeah, I applaud the gusto and the gesture for sure, and it is something obviously I want to explore, and it's obviously something I'm trying to push within the conversation. Is that we're all wanting ultimately the same ideals. And actually, if we could remove the stigma, if we could change the preconceptions that are installed within the majority of the populace, there would be no hemp. They would be called industrial cannabis, or we'd call it commercial or constructive or whatever, or some form of term would be applied to it. And it's a point I wanted to sort of raise was an American study that found that just arbitrarily lifting from 0.2 to 1% THC and the efficacy in terms of the production of the plant. It's not just in terms of the sheer amount of fiber and cellulose, etc., that is astronomically increased. The health of the roots in terms of the mycelial connections, the nutrifying of soils, and especially remediation, so removing of things, increases exponentially. So with that being said, do you think that, as is currently being pushed by a few different entities within the UK, that a 1% under a licensing system is anything at all, or whether if then the fight is for, or rather if the rebellion is to grow without a license, what is the difference that when then does it stop being hemp? If you're then going to do it without a license and go 0.2, are you then going to grow 0.3? Would you then grow that 1%? Would it? And that's what I'm sort of trying to, because if the distinction of law is removed, then the impetus to stay either side of it kind of is also removed, especially if it's then for end result in terms of the sheer amount of oil that can be produced, the amount of flowers, the amount of byproducts that can be created.
And also in terms of options, agricultural options, you know, in the European area, if you want to take a hemp cultivar off the list to grow, you're limited to, I don't know, you know, it was about 17 or so options, and that's to cover the whole of all European climates. Right, so every geographical condition across the whole of Europe has to be covered by 17 cultivars. If we raised it to 1%, we're up to above 100 options, right? And so that means that farmers have got way more options for their specific soil type, their specific weather conditions, and a more successful agriculture. And so yeah, it's not only for all the very good reasons you've outlined, a no-brainer. It's agriculturally, it's essential too. And Switzerland have gone for 1%, right? It's interesting, in the Channel Islands, they've gone for a ratio of what they're allowed to be sold as CBD. Sorry. So they've said, yeah, the ratio between the CBD and THC will determine how much THC you can have in the plant and what you can grow. And that's an interesting approach. 1% is a more simplistic approach and a good one too.
I think ultimately my ambition is to see vertical integration. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read a webpage in my head. I can't think what the company is called, but I saw this amazing video that was put together by a company, I think they're in South America currently. And what they've done is they've created an insular energy production facility cultivating low THC inside. So what they've done is they created this base model of, I think it's 5 stories. And so it's 5 vertical grow rooms, and they put 1.something million plants in there, and they're growing it for biomass to feed a generator. But what they're doing is they're pumping atmospheric carbon into it. Obviously, we know this question of in cannabis is 325 kilograms per atmospheric ton, you know, massive sequestration potentiality. And so they're pumping this in, and they're doing this purely as a biomass. But what they've done for the calculations is the CO2 reduction in the area, and then it becomes self-feeding. Obviously, it's then all grown hydroponically as well, so the water reclaim is through the roof. It's obviously missing the properties to be able to sort of help with soil health, but the idea of the scalable models, so actually the cannabis inside of them is where it never leaves. So my next idea would then be to go the step further, which is then actually you switch it from hemp to cannabis so that you create another chambered section where you extract the oils. And then you've got another revenue stream. You've also then got bioethanols that you could produce from it as well to divert out while still creating biomass to burn within the insular incinerators, which then do CO2 capture technology to feed the plants back in. It's a wonderful self-insular model that they've designed, but it's still the first of what's to come if we can get past this whole thing of that has to be medical, that has to be industrial, that has to be people getting potted off the heads. You know what I mean? Once we can recognize it's all the same plant, and actually the removal of the arbitrary restraints would lead to far better products. If we want to then talk about the 1 in 20,000 people that is potential to have a negative temporary psychosis-like event from the consumption of cannabis, that could be massively negated by much more CBG, much more CBD within different cultivars that are on the market, or even within just products. In the same way that in Amsterdam in a coffee shop, somebody gets a wee bit too much on the wacky backy and they'll give them a Mars bar and a can of Coke, and the sugar helps, you know, pull them around a bit and on your way. Then the consumption space in the future would then be smarter with this. They would use antagonist cannabinoids that would effectively knock THC off. So there is so much more of the potential of this if they can all be sort of integrated. And so my next question then would be, if it wasn't for, I suppose, what I've been personally terming recently the medical cannabis industrial complex, do you think that you guys would also be able to look at the potential of producing all of those agricultural beneficial properties with them producing potentially medical grade oils?
What, producing them all together? Yeah,
it's obviously because my vision is everything sort of vertically integrated, because then if it wasn't for the arbitrary nature of the licenses, or now, again, as I'm terming the medical cannabis industrial complex, creating a pay-to-play system and a very restrictive system that means just nobody's getting in from the bottom up, you get in from the top down, you know what I mean? That if that wasn't there, sort of hypothetically, would you see yourselves sort of producing larger things? I know obviously your main thought is towards building materials and sort of biocomposites and things like that. But as we've sort of discussed, with actually the higher productions of the oils increases the production of fibrous materials and everything else.
Look, we want the freedom to be able to grow whichever type of crop is best for the products we want to produce, right? And I'll give you an example. I just gave the example about the limitation on the 0.2% versus 1%. But the currently newly enforced regime in CBD, whereby they've had on the books this bizarre trace amount of THC permitted in any product of 1 milligram. They've had it on the books forever, but they've always known that it was a kind of a nonsense. It was such an arbitrarily low amount that they just stuck to what they allowed licensed growers to grow, which was 0.2% THC in the plant, and they allowed that in the products. And in every high street shop that CBD was sold in, it was all 0.2, 0.2. And in March this year, they decided, and I can tell you why I think they did it. They decided to make it enforce that regulation, basically enforce 1 milligram in any product. And by any product, they didn't just mean any product on the shelf. They meant any product being imported in bulk. So when we got our license refused this year, we applied for 2 licenses. Our farmer here applied, and he got rejected on the grounds of history. They said in prior to 2019, you harvested CBD. We rejected you in 2019, and we're going to reject you in 2021 again for the same reason. Okay, that's ridiculous, but we understand it. It's ridiculous. The reason they rejected Hempen itself on a separate site was because they said, can you prove that when you import your CBD from abroad, which we make you do, that there is less than 1 milligram in the total bulk container, which
is 1 litre.
Yeah, so that's basically impossible, right?
Artificially.
So, wait, from phytocannabinoids, yeah, that's basically impossible.
Exactly. So, and they know that, right? So they're just being difficult, right? And from our perspective, this is just such a ridiculous restriction. Straight off the bat, we lost our biggest selling product. When we had to stop harvesting our own CBD, we lost our biggest selling product. So every time they enforce one of these regulations, part of our business just gets shaved off, major part of our business. And that makes it increasingly a struggle to survive. So all of these restrictions, we're in no way supportive of them. They don't work for us as a business, and don't work for anyone as a business, except the corporates. And I'll tell you why. There's these different restrictions act as barriers to entry into the market. That's essentially what they do. Right. So in the first place, don't allow people to harvest the flowers from industrial hemp, because you're a threat to GW Pharma's profits as a company that has 90% of the cannabis patents in the world at the time. What's the point of their patents if any old Farmer Giles can harvest his CBD his flowers for CBD, his hemp flowers for CBD, and produce a product that is equivalent to some of GW Pharmaceuticals' products, namely Sativex, for much less money and at actually a much better standard. So don't allow British farmers to do that. Okay, but it's happening around the world now. So, what are we going to do? Okay, at that point, in comes the novel foods regulation, which says, okay, the CBD is a novel food. It's a new food. We don't know how it's going to react to the human body. So everyone has to do big trials, expensive trials, and get special licenses to sell CBD. Who can do that? Only people with deep pockets. Okay, so that's limiting who can get involved in hemp. In CBD extraction at that point, and there's another barrier to entry, and you have to now be, a very wealthy enterprise with big financial backing to even walk through the door.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but then okay, so all right. Well, now we're narrowing the range of CBD producers in Europe rapidly. Well, let's throw another one in. Let's say that you can't have more than 1 milligram in any product, even your bulk import product. Okay, so now you're a CBD extractor. You have to extract the THC out of your CBD, and to do that, you have to have a high THC license. Because now you're carrying pure THC, which is, according to the law, terribly dangerous. And so you have to have a high THC license. Now, to get a high THC license in this country is going to cost you at least £10 million. And even then, you're not going to be guaranteed getting one. So who can get all of those licenses? And who's it protecting? It's only protecting the corporates. It's only protecting the big pharmaceuticals in the first place, and then the corporates coming in after them. And it's forcing out all of the grassroots.
It's also setting up the ground for synthetic and isolate extracts, because to be below that artificially ridiculous 0.01%, then you're really looking at synthetic isolates. And so it's pushing out all the whole plant organic natural extracts that actually the successful part of this industry and like small medium-sized businesses has built up over the last few years, and has successfully been healing people from all sorts of ailments and chronic illnesses, and we're not going to see that type of efficacy of the oils if we're having isolates as well. One of our suppliers actually didn't even bother submitting a novel foods license for the broad spectrum extract, because they had got the advice from their lawyers that it probably wouldn't get through. And currently only their synthetic isolate has got the pre-validation. So it's just showing the way that this is going, and it's kind of like a race to who can capture the mainstream narrative of whole plants better, or no, isolate's better, and isolate is reinforced under the guise of like safety and quality and pharmaceutical grade, but that we were making organic UK CBD, which was admittedly actually reasonably like low CBD strength. It was like 3% strength, yet we were having astounding results from it, and hence why it was our most popular product as well.
And so you see that it's not just growers, it's not just producers, it's also the consumers now are being shortchanged across the board, right? The people who are using CBD regularly, and this is not the likes of your average listener, but this is, people's grandma and granddad who have never touched cannabis in their life and would never consider touching, cannabis, even though we all know it is cannabis in their life. They're totally committed to these products, and because it's changing their lives, and now they've been told, no, you can only have a shit synthetic version. Pardon me for swearing. I'm not sure. No, if that's all right. Oh.
Please, we have to get in the swearing quarter because Macca isn't here. He's Irish, bless him, so it's every other word. But I'm Northern, so it's like my third word. So yeah, we get there. I'm secretly smiling, or now quite openly smiling, because this is everything I said 3 years ago. Anybody that can be bothered to go back, look on my Facebook and watch me paranoidly ranting about the direction of where things were goddamn going. And now what we've seen is the creation of the ACI, the CMC. We've seen things a bit funneled and devised off. So we then saw, as we saw with the novel foods designation, as you've said, through then to the FSA being given the keys to the kingdom, and then being blindfolded and spun around and having both arms tied behind the back, and then kicked into a room and said, go sort this shit out. it's kind of a reason this is the car crash right now. You know what I mean? The whole industry is deliberately being set up to fail, and it is coming from the same thing. It is exactly, I'm terming it the medical cannabis industrial complex, because that is what they are. So anything that in any which way has efficacy or can improve or condition or reduce the symptoms of one, automatically under their distinction has to be medical. So it has to fall within their remit. It has to fall within these archaic systems. The old pharmacology doesn't survive the new world that we know of using cannabis, especially with the science that is emerging now of co-crystallization of terpenes and cannabinoids creating far greater efficacy. We're starting to really crack the idea of the entourage effect, where
sorry, tractor.
We got a tractor in the background.
That's all, I can hear it, like how good my headphones are. I can hear it coming, and then I got like nervous when someone's going to hit me in this one. So the distinctions, the arbitrary distinctions that have then been created, whether you're we're wellness, and no, we're hemp, and the consumers may be different, the marketing may be different, but the plant is the same. And actually, from this conversation, all I've heard here is commonality, is that actually the way we get everything on all sides, the way we have the recreational clubs, the way we have the cooperative growers that can produce their own extracts and create real bespoke, real craft niche products to, frankly, a higher standard than most of the regulations that are currently put forward within, again, the medical cannabis industrial complex. And I think that the power that they have got towards patents, you've got to remember, as you said, GW own some unbelievable synthetic patents. So you look at them, what's happening again with certain companies, the David Beckham-backed venture of cellular goods. They deliberately got in early, crashed out on the market because they're holding for something that is coming, a change in regulation. The same with this NFL star and peels, the orange peel synthetic one. There's another company, in fact, there's two companies that I think I'm aware of. Yeah, I think it's two that are at war with each other, trying to produce the first yeast extract to market. But again, somebody already owns the patent. So I think they're trying to skirt around that. You've then got major lawsuits going down between Canopy and GW and things like that. You've then got what's going to be effectively have to be a review of the Cancer Act in this country, because of when Jazz have bought GW and the patents that they own around cannabinoids causing apoptosis, cannabinoids and certain combinations of cannabinoids, really having a powerful effect on some of the most destructive conditions that we know. I mean, the consensus science is slowly moving towards this idea of chronic endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome. When that becomes the consensus science, all of these other plant-derived medications, all of these synthetic pills and everything else that they've spent a century building become useless, and everything is about cannabis. So it's who then holds the patent, who then is the man that signs the license. He's the one you've got to pay in the backroom deal. And that's what they've set themselves up for. So a lot of these guys started as companies and went, no, let's regulate this shit. Then the regulators went, no, let's license this shit. And so the war is going on between people trying to own the auto-neutral genetics, the daylight neutral genetics that make an autoflower strain. You've got then people working on trying to patent combinations of terpenes and cannabinoids, which means effectively they could patent cultivars, different, what we currently call in old language, strains. So there's all kinds of corruption going on within the huge corporate level that actually, if we are not them, we are all each other. So there is your fight to grow your tall, skinny, fibrous, wonderful, low cannabis, THC cannabis plants is the same for me to grow my big, bushy, resinous, lovely knockout weed at home. It's the same. That's what I'm trying to get my audience and anyone that engages in my content to try to recognize is the blinkers that have been placed on us, the arbitrary distinctions that have been forced into our consciousness, the very vernacular that we use to discuss this has been designed by them to divide us. So every time we say hemp, we're saying that cannabis isn't hemp. So therefore cannabis is only what gets you high. It's not going to build any of these things. In the same way, if we say medical cannabis, we're saying that hemp and cannabis are not medical. So we have to be very careful of the languages that we use. So I suppose one of the things I wanted to bring up for the audience was that the root, I suppose, the nomenclature, the term of sort of hemp. So hemp comes from the old Germanic and is very of the European continent. It works its way through Saxon and then comes through into modern English. It goes through like Hempen, hemp, Hanep, and then hemp. I think I've mixed the order up there. And then cannabis sativa or cannabis sativa L that we get as in from the Latin, that is then became in the 1700s the sort of collective botanical name. So when they started writing the global encyclopedias documenting the flora and fauna of the world, they had to pick on the one sort of term across it. And the point that I want sort of people to I suppose, meditate on for a second is the idea of whenever you see in America, they'll talk about cannabis when it's the big boys playing and they're building these huge companies and the dispensaries. But as soon as somebody's caught up illegally, it's still marijuana. They're still, until we have this consensus within the language, they will still be able to change it subtly enough that it means that the viewer, the observer of that conversation, then automatically falls to a bias. Because I'm cannabis and because you're hemp, as it were, for the sake of this argument, the connotations are human trafficking from my side of it. You know, it's kids in hoodies in parks. You know what I mean? It's the obnoxious side of it. It's the criminality. Whereas when people are thinking of hemp, they think of the hippies and they think of running through glorious fields. And it's the connotations that are in our minds that have been solidified there by media. And that I think is the greatest impediment we face, is that until we can have these conversations, until we can find and express that commonality. And again, I'm not going to say to you guys, stop saying hemp. That's not what I'm sort of saying here. I air quote it whenever I write about hemp or medical cannabis, to say that I'm meaning the colloquial understanding of the word, not meaning hemp instead of cannabis, using it as it's understood today. And I think that if we can do that more in our conversations, we don't unintentionally paint the other as another, which is something I'm trying to be really mindful of myself. And something I've been trying to be mindful of the entirety of this recording, is that, again, I'm not against hemp, and I may have presented against hemp in the past, but I'm not really. I'm just trying to I'm fighting for the recognition of it all, that hemp is the collection of low THC cultivars of cannabis.
Absolutely. And you know, from my background as a campaigner, there was always a divide and rule tactic of good protester, bad protester, or good activist, bad activist. You know, activists do this kind of action, they're nice, you know, if they're, you know, peaceful and polite and, you know, vote for the right people, that's all right. And if they're noisy and aggressive and take direct action, they're bad protesters. There was always that going on. And that's a divide and rule tactic. And we have got to be vigilant to them, even ones that started historically a long time ago. And we know, you know, your listeners will know the history of how cannabis was criminalized. You know, it was done with, for corrupt reasons, and it was done using the sort of inherent racism of America at the time to, you know, demonize a plant as a whole, so that its industrial benefits couldn't, you know, threaten certain industries. And, you know, 60, 70, 80 years later, even, we're still dealing with the consequences of that. But in the history of the plant, that's a blip, that's nothing, you know, that's nothing, you know, thousands and thousands of years of history. And now, look, everyone and their grandma is using some form of cannabis product in the UK today. And they're starting to realize that, yeah, I am using cannabis, you know, and I'm using it because it really works. And when I use it in this way, I call it hemp. And when I use it that way, I call it medical cannabis. And when my cousin or my grandson or whoever it is smokes in the park, well, they call it marijuana. It's all the same plant. It's all the same plant. It's just different variations. And people are getting to that by different degrees, but by using the plant in their own way, they're finding their own way in.
I think it is such an important point that you raised, though, that that issue needs to be bridged, and there does need to be now an evolution of the terminology that we use, because it like you say, it is the same plant. And also, I mean, I think the wording has helped in a way to reintroduce it gently kind of back into society, into you know, populations that necessarily wouldn't have ever touched cannabis again, you know, because there is just such a strong stigma behind it all. And I think that hemp, the terminology of kind of separating it has helped it to kind of be reintroduced to the population, to you know, lots of middle-aged people who smoked it, you know, once back in the day, and, you know, couldn't even think about using it again. And so I think it's had a role to play, but there is we need to now evolve that onto the next step of this, and that's a reason why I've always had a problem with the fact that it's called CBD oil, because actually that is not just CBD, that is a whole plant extract of cannabis, and that it needs to be called cannabis oil. There are lots of other constituents within that oil that actually create and ensure that it is a very therapeutic oil and enhances all of its properties. And so it even in the way that it's been called CBD on its own, has catered to the more pharmaceutical perspective or idea of what they want that oil to be. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting talking to one of my chemist friends not too long ago, who's quite intimately involved in the industry. The medical cannabis professionals effectively consider anything that isn't a cannabinoid a contaminant. That's what the medical cannabis industrial complex sees this as. Cannabis is a cannabinoid delivery device. So even though we all know the combustion vaporization of all of it as a composite material has profound effects on a multitude of pathways within the brain, not just within the cannabis receptors, they're trying to mitigate these undesirable and unpredictable side effects. Again, this is the language that they're using. They want single compounds, especially isolate compounds, and especially more so now when you look at the terminology. So 2018, we were very much astroturfed as a collective community in this country, believing that we were going to get air quotes medical cannabis American style. We grow it ourselves, we self-diagnose, and we just go, cannabis is cannabis, I use it for this, therefore it's therapeutic for me. And then they came out of this with Schedule 2 under 2001 Misuse of Drugs Act, which said that they created a thing for cannabis-based medical products designed for human consumption is what the terminology of it. And so when you break that down, when you actually look at the subcategorization of what it means, it's the combination of a cannabinoid and a classic pharmacological drug. So actually, even within the one nuance of the licensing, the way they've got away with prescribing herbal flowers at the minute is under section A of that. It says that combustion will nullify your prescription. So you have to then vaporize it. So there's an argument to be made about limitation, but we're not going to go into that. But they deliberately put this in place so that they now can prescribe it as an unlicensed medication in floral form. And then it seems to me, in my paranoid brain, if you want to call it that it's data collection. So then as they're coming back, they're getting these huge data sets on all of these individual conditions. If we then look at a lot of the funding and where this is coming from, there was an article in the Extract recently, for all I don't particularly read that all that too much, showing links between some of the recent Oxford studies and big tobacco companies. So we already know that there are large vested interests pushing the direction of research towards the conclusion that they've already decided when they wrote that act in 2018. This isn't just new. They didn't just decide to give the FSA regulation of this. This has all been working towards this. This is part of an incremental plan that was concocted by industries far beyond our understanding. The same thing of what happened in Canada. It was written for almost a social enterprise moving forward. Then it got very much manipulated into this very large pay-to-play system. And then as soon as alcohol and tobacco put their money into it, it went through the fucking roof. And then you ended up with this huge bastardized commercial model that the majority of people, even if they're making good money in it, are still like, we don't like this. This is not what we had in mind. This is not what we see as a viable industry.
And this is, we're seeing in this industry the pharmaceuticalization of our health. So we've got a bit of background noise. We're seeing the pharmaceuticalization of our health, and basically what that means is that profit comes before your health. Right, their profit becomes before your health. It becomes not only before your health, it becomes before safety, if that was ever a concern. Safety is often used as a justification for regulation, which is really just about making profit. Mm-hmm. This is why I say the plant is coming through. Right, cannabis, whether it's called hemp or whatever, in whatever form is coming through into the human consciousness again. There's a renaissance. It's coming back, right? It's not even a revolution. It's a renaissance, and it's coming back across the board. And corporate capitalism is looking to capture that and do what it does, which is create cartel monopolies and use its friends in governments who are in their pay, basically, to make sure that the regulations suit their bank balances, and suit their future growth trajectories and their share prices. And they're very effective at doing that. And they do it in every industry. We're not special. It's just that we're seeing this because it's been newly released. Cannabis has been so held back. Hemp has been so held back for so many years that actually cartel capitalism didn't get to have a go at it until now. And so we're now seeing it happen at warp speed. We've watched it in the lifetime of Hempen, going from no one really even knowing what CBD is to this extreme form of regulation with all these barriers to entry and corporate cartels forming right in front of our eyes.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that they criminalized cannabis and then they said it was bad because of the culture that arose from it. The criminal element that arose from criminalizing cannabis was then a self-justifying mechanism as to why the continuation of this. Then obviously, we discover, there's this endocannabinoid system. What's this? There's an interesting actually correlation between the international discovery or the international awareness of the endocannabinoid system and the UK allowing the first licensing of hemp in the UK. So it is quite interesting correlation. You then look at the Royal Commission in 1997. There's a Philip Robson Green. I'm thinking of Robson Green now. I've just messed up my head. The gentleman who I can't think of did the Royal Commission basically came back with a report saying that, cannabis is basically, I suppose, benign in terms of threat, but has a great deal of potentiality as a therapeutic, should be decriminalized and research should be done immediately. Within 6 months, GW was formed. Within 3 years, the law was changed to allow them to be able to prescribe products. That's what created the 2001 misuse of drugs regulations. Yeah. And then since then, they have gone on a spree in terms of patent and research.
Which is interesting also when they said that you can't harvest the flowers, right? Licensed hemp farmers in the UK can't harvest flowers in 2001.
There you go. So again,
they knew what a threat it would be.
Again, correlatory, because it's very difficult to know what a crop is going to be until it is cropped, until it has had its final end result. Even then, if you're then testing a plant that is wet, you're going to have the acidic forms of them. Under the first draft of most of the misuse regulations, acidic forms of the cannabinoids weren't even considered. So it's final product. So there's so many loopholes and little bits that can be exploited in different ways to create viable defenses, as we were talking about before, to cultivate en masse. I think that what kind of needs to happen now at this point is, like I said, is the reaching of an olive branch across industries. And I know that's quite hard. I know I'm taking flack in certain corners from the traditional vendor market or the legacy market, but I'm trying to fight to protect them. It's because of the criminals that have been before me, the activists that have come before me, that I'm able to do what I do with basic impunity. I can go and shout in the face of a cop and walk away. I can live stream accosting police in the street with weed and it not be an issue. We let 1,000 people through fucking Cardiff and we got the cops either side. It was high as shit. We just kept blowing smoke in the face and they just laughed all day. It was wonderful. But I can only do that because people have suffered, because people have gone to prison, because people have died, because people have lived in unbelievable anguish and misery because they want to be legally a good person. And the same is then true for what you guys have then done in this interim of this period of like 2014 through to like 2019 of this real renaissance, like you say, of this revolution within middle class and within, I don't want to say the bourgeois, but within people that would see cannabis as a very low class thing. It smells and they're very lazy and they're going to be lying around and the reggae music or whatever preconceptions, you know what I mean? And I think, as you said earlier, it's these distinctions have allowed us to develop sub-pockets, but I think now is the time to recognize that we are together and to unify in that. And I'm not quite sure how we do that, because there are some people obviously opposed to any form of change because the status quo is pretty good for them, whether that be criminal dealers organizing en masse or whether it be the corporates on the other sort of side of it. But if we recognize that we're not either of them, then surely everyone else is in the same boat.
Yeah, I mean, look, like it's interesting because getting high is just one use of cannabis, right? Yeah. But it's the one use that carried it from this widespread use plant, the first $1 billion crop, you know, everyone getting very excited about it, needing it to win wars, etc. I mean, not that winning wars is important, but like, you know, that's the level of seriousness with which many countries and most of the world took hemp and cannabis. It's only because it got people high that people carried the flame, so to speak, through the dark years where you weren't allowed to do anything with it, where you weren't even allowed to be licensed to grow it as industrial hemp in most countries, you know. So that little one feature of it has carried it through and has carried the flame for lots of people to keep connecting with the plant and keep learning about all of its other benefits, as well as that one medical, industrial, wellness, therapeutic, construction, whatever it is. And now we've come through that dark period, and we're ready to join all of those uses up together and say the plant, you know, I always make this joke. It's like, if there are aliens that are like looking after us, they must have left this plant here to help us, because it does so many things. You're playing top trumps and you've got cannabis or hemp. You've got top points in every category. It's not fair, right? Why is it so good nutritionally? Why is it so good medicinally? Why is it such an amazing fabric and fiber? Why is it making amazing biocomposites? And why is it produce some of the best built construction materials we know about at the moment, right? This is crazy, you know? So where's this plant come from? We don't know, but it's here. And, you know, we need it to help the crisis that the planet is in at the moment. And we cannot allow corporate capitalism to do what it does, which is hold it back, weaken its efficacy, divide us, and while they profit from it. Because it's too important. It's too important for the healing of this planet. And, you know, we know that they do that across the board, but this is the one area that's new, and we can actually have a good fight on, and we can win.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not just, as you say, the right to get high, the right to grow a plant. It is now a fight for our lives. Yeah. We have seen within the past month, you know, flooding in Belgium, France, Germany, China, New York, London. You then got a place like Turkey, Canada, Greece, you know, on fire. It's the collective ecology of the world is in crisis. And I think we're at a point of recognizing that capitalism isn't compatible with the continuation of the human species. That if we continue on with the trajectory that we're on, life is not just going to end, but the walk towards that slow, painful, miserable death is going to be vile and abhorrent, and people are going to become vicious and bitter and resentful. I mean, we're seeing this through sort of COVID. I mean, yeah, there's been great community effort and whatever else, but there's also been a lot of people who've just gone, screw this. They are literally waiting for an apocalypse. And I think that, as Bob Marley said, that cannabis is the healing of a nation. And he also said that alcohol is its ruin. And I think that's kind of where we are now as culturally, that the pubs are given special dispensation with these harm reduction facilities for an intoxicant that kills about 10% of the UK population. It's twice the global average. I mean, alcohol kills, from World Health Organization on statistics, 5% of all deaths in the world are directly attributable to it. And this isn't including new information that they've just found that it's comorbid in, I think, 5 different new other types of cancer. So we can literally, if we swap then again those two substances out, it can be hugely, massively beneficial. Then, as we said, if we're talking about carbon sequestration, if we can then start to deal with that, we then don't have to move too far towards a carbon tax and actually then just creating a greenwashing situation where the same corporate entities will own the idea of renewables and sustainable, and they'll create a new narrative that 50 years down the line we'll have to be fighting for another revolution to change. Whereas cannabis is the ultimate ubiquitous resource. You know, I mean, it's got an intrinsic nature to it. I've said this a few times recently, and I sound like a hippie, but it self hermaphrodizes because it knows when it's in a nice environment. It literally goes, boom, I'm going to produce seeds. I'm going to re-go through generations here. We know through genetic drift that hemp can't actually self-sustain through 1 or 2 cycles, that you have to go crop into crop because the genetic drift of it means it wants to produce THC. You stress a plant, its natural response is to produce THC. I've gone a bit from where I was, but my point is that with the different sort of avenues that could be explored with this are far beyond that of the substance of the drug. As you said, that was the one excuse that we've got from holding it back. But ironically, its consumption in terms of what it does to the consciousness, I think is so profound, because if you want to get the guy that's driving in his Lamborghini, that's burning all the fuel in the world, that's investing tens of thousands a year in fast fashion, you know what I mean, that's polluting through every industry that they're consuming through, to have an awareness of what they're doing, it isn't going to be through taxing. It isn't going to be through an impediment financially, because it's not going to harm them really. You need them to have a visceral experience. As you said, it is THC and the intoxicant nature, the euphoric nature of cannabis is what allowed this knowledge to be brought into the world. And I think that it's that's going to kick us up the arse to go, shit, if we don't apply this, we're done. We are done. We're still mining for lithium. We're sending kids down in underground in unbelievable situations to get components for mobile phones and shit. For industry that it only exists now to self-perpetuate endless cyclical growth of capitalism.
Yeah, and I think we see that with like THC use that's going on now, when people are using the RSO or FICO oil in order to heal their cancers and other chronic illnesses, and that a byproduct of that is that then people are connecting to the plant in that more ethereal way, and like it's such a heart opener, and people are starting to reconnect with themselves, their relations, and it's opening people up to a different way of seeing the world. And I think that is another way in which cannabis is going to like come back to heal the planet, is through that way. And whether I mean, I'm not completely sure, but whether that's taking THC through pharmaceutical avenues, or whether that's taking THC that Bob down the road's made for them, you know, that the experience of connecting to that plant in that way would still be the same, and hopefully therefore open up those doorways for a bit more self-reflection, and to look at different ways of living and with themselves and with each other and with the planet.
Well, I also think that there is a difference between Bob down the road and pharmaceutical option. And I think that that's also the difference between life, the fight for life, and the fight for a decent quality of life. You know, the pharmaceutical industry will be very happy for us to survive, but be feeble and weak, because then it can sell us more pharmaceuticals. You know, and one of its problems with full spectrum, holistic cannabis extract, you know, CBD oil, whatever you want to call it, one of their problems with it is that it undermines a whole host of their products. You know, it's not just that they want to protect their cannabis products, it's that they want to protect all their products. And when people start connecting with holistic herbal health, you know, and this very powerful plant, but Zena's a herbalist, she can tell you about many plants that can heal all manner of ailments, cannabis just being one of them. They don't need to go to these pharmaceutical industries. We don't need these corporate structures. We can look after ourselves in our own homes, in our own communities, and have some control over that, and actually have some understanding. And we don't have to destroy the planet to do it. We actually connect to the plants, we connect to our gardens, we connect to our communities, and start to bring in that collective care ethic of connection and holism, rather than the pharmaceutical ethic of disconnection, division, and symptom suppression. You know.
Yeah. Well, exactly that. I mean, Yeah, cannabis isn't a panacea, but because of its unique way in which it supplements your endocannabinoid system, especially as you said, full plant fecal oils, because of it was saying before about the co-crystallization between and synergy between the terpenes, flavonoids, and cannabinoids. It increases the efficacy to a whole new level. And like you said, it's not just dealing with symptom suppression. You are talking about healing, whereas the pharmaceutical industry are interested in maintenance drugs. Yeah. They want to give you just enough, but you keep coming back to me to buy it. Whereas actually a lot of the original sort of research, and vast majority of it obviously is anecdotal, that comes from the community itself, is of people resetting, asthmatics no longer being asthmatic, people, obviously, we talk about with cancers and things like this, but people actually fully putting into remission chronic ailments, like then they consume in terms of just a conscious thing of going, I just want to smoke a bit of weed tonight. And actually the gums don't distinguish between whether they're enjoying to sit on the couch to do it or whether it's topping up that system to prevent a relapse into whatever that condition was. And I think that the autonomy, that is the most powerful thing. This is why I advocate above everything, is for the right to grow our own, is that going from this little thing, planting it and nurturing it, watering it every day and waking up and waiting for the light to come on and sticking your head round. And then all of that love, all of that energy, that interconnection that you have with this thing, it's like raising a child. You know what I mean? It changes the structure of your brain. You want to talk about dealing with depression and anxiety, if you're having to deal with someone like that. And then the reward of then that visceral sort of connection to this plant. It's not just, I've taken a pill and a bit later, I feel better now. It's, you notice the whole thing, the experience, and in the connection to it is primal, truly primal. And I think that once you have that with that, you recognize that actually, I'm going to go for a walk. You know what I mean? Just out of the blue, you start to hear yourself. Your own instinct going, drink some water. Oh yeah, I'm thirsty. You know what I mean? I shouldn't eat that. Your instincts start to kick back in. Your intrinsic intelligence starts to come alive again. And you're not just a docile consumer waiting to be pumped to the next advert to go, I'll go to McDonald's and I've just seen the giant M, or I'll pull over and I'll get a coffee because it's there. Or I'll do, you actively start to go, how do I feel? What do I want? And you have a very different relationship with the world that is antithetical to capitalism. And that is the scariest thing of this. It's what they recognize with cannabis, because it causes metacognition and introspection. People then smoke. It's like Bill Hicks said, cannabis does not make you lazy. It just makes you realize that a lot of the shit you do isn't worth doing. Yeah. And I think that's why you're held back in terms of wanting, obviously there is the industrialized reasoning for it and the benefit of the petroleum industry, of plastics, etc. But the main one is this social idea of the, actually they can't control that. They currently control it. It's been a controlled drug for 50 years. Yeah, there's 4 or 5 million of us. You know what I mean? It's a joke of a narrative. We're already here. There is already an industry here. There is already 10 billion a year made on sex and drugs in the UK. A large portion of that is cannabis. All we want is legitimacy, whether it be as you guys are seeking to cultivate the agricultural potential benefits of it, or whether it's then people wanting to cultivate plants to produce into oils or extracts to, on some form, heal people, or in others, just allow them to access a deeper part of their consciousness. I don't think the distinction should be made by the regulators. The distinction should be made by the consumers, because I qualify for medical, air quotes, medical cannabis, but I'm sure as hell not going to consume it. I'm going to keep growing and consuming and accessing the illicit weed that I know does far better for me, that I don't feel it would be disingenuous to then prop up a system that, for all I recognize it needs to exist, it has legitimacy and it has purpose. But it can only exist in a world of true knowledge, not when they're sat hiding 90% of the information of this plant so that they can trick out little dots, dribbles and drabs of information attached to patented products like the Sativex trials that we're seeing now.
And this is across the board, right? We're talking about in the context of cannabis, but let's be clear, from my perspective, from at least the 1970s, the whole pharmaceutical industry model, and probably before that actually, but from at least it has always been treatment, not cure. So, like you say, keeps someone having to take a pill every day rather than giving them a cure that solves their problem in a meaningful and deep way once and for all. Suppress the symptoms every day and actually build up bigger problems down the line, which then you can then sell them more pharmaceutical products to deal with. And each pharmaceutical product has its own set of side effects, which you need more pharmaceutical products for.
Snowball.
It's a snowball. It's a snowball. And look, at this point, this is like I would say that the pharmaceutical industry is effectively like the war industry. It's like the weapons industry. It's exploitative, and it doesn't peddle anything to do with health. It peddles illness and ultimately death.
Sick care rather than healthcare.
Exactly. It's sick care rather than healthcare. And we are the terrain of warfare, our bodies and our minds, and they make us think that only they have the solution to our health problems, when often the opposite is true. And when we can, as a community and as individuals, as community, build up that folk knowledge of how to heal ourselves, which was basically taken away from us, with the burning of the witches and the suppression of women and the hierarchicalization of medical treatment, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, but in other countries around the world, it's happening today, right? In Britain, it happened, 400, 500 plus years ago and continued. But the sooner we can get back to that, the sooner we can take back our own power, empower ourselves, heal ourselves. And when we heal ourselves, we realize that we're connected to this whole planet. We're all one here, and we can start healing the planet as well as stopping to destroy it.
I mean, this one of the points sort of to sort of muse on is that actually, if they can position themselves to be the perceived healers, to actually be able to deal with the cancer pandemic that has been going off, as to why in my lifetime I was born in a world of 1 in 4 chance to now 1 in 2 chance. If they can present themselves as that, then they're obviously not the ones who are giving us cancer. They're not the ones polluting the air or the water or putting glyphosate on our foods. Or, do you know what I mean? And I think that is a real big part of this, is that we as individuals don't want to die. We don't want to kill ourselves. We want to make informed choices, and we think we are. So when everyone was smoking in the 50s going, oh, you got a bit of a cough? You have a cigarette, it'll clear you out. We're being misled. We're being lied to and manipulated, and it is no different than any other big lie. And that is the ultimate lie here, is that in some way, all cannabis isn't cannabis. That in some way, this plant that has been here before humans, it would seem. I mean, the agricultural studies that they did to it, I think, put it on the Tibetan plateau 28 million years ago. Long before you've got modern Homo sapiens, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's mental. This 100 years of a blip. We then look at what's happened with the world. If you look at, as we touched on before, environmental, you can actually plot when the hemp tax was put in place in 1937 in America, and then when eradication started in the 70s globally. You can plot where the temperatures start to go up, where desertification increases, where deforestation increases, because again, they were moved away from using it as a pulp to make into paper, which is what it was majority used for before they started to create the modern timber pulp industry, which then actually produces the second most polluting and toxin in the world, dioxins. They've created all of these industries that are hugely destructive. And I mean, again, same with the pesticides put on cotton for fast fashion. That's like 50% of all pesticides. No, I'm reading the wrong statistic in my head. It's 25% of all pesticides is used in cotton in fashion. That is insanity. If that was all again reverted back to then hemp, we know about the durability and of how much longer it'll last, about what it'll do for remediation of the soil, what it'll do for its natural pesticide, no need for fertilizers, etc. So there's all of these different avenues. I mean, we've touched on so much in probably quite a sporadic different order, but I think that it comes down to if we're still talking about fences, my side of the fence has to recognize that without your knowledge, we're going to kill the planet faster. These corporations and their corporate greenhouses, they're negating the potential to sequester carbon. They're negating the plastics and the timber and all of the other potential industry they could offset, because they're mulching it, they're binning it because they don't care about it, because they want the flour. In the same way that you guys happen to bin the flour because you then want the materials. There's a problem here. If we can get this lot together, we can see how that every time a plant is grown, everything is beneficial. There are derivable terpenes from cannabis roots I've just discovered recently. As Trev reminds me every time I got them see him, you can make gunpowder out of cannabis roots. like, yeah, we've got to be careful of the Terrorism Act whenever we say that shit. But there's all of these derivable technologies and potential applications of this plant that every time it is grown, whether it be in somebody's bedroom or in a field en masse, every part of it should be used because it has the potential to save the planet, to offset this horrible kilter of wealth inequality, to end homelessness by building affordable homes that actually then sequester further carbon. The next generation of battery technology in cannabis graphene quantum capacitors. Then we're not even talking about graphene oxide in terms of the potential medical applications of something like that. We are scratching a Star Trek future, and it starts with us having these kind of conversations. So I hope anybody that has listened to this and has taken anything on board will hopefully do more research into all of this. And what I mean by that is to not pick a side. And I'm trying very hard to hold my hands up. I've done it in the past, guys. It's difficult not to, but all cannabis is cannabis. Whatever we choose to call it, however we want to define it, it is still all of the same genus of cannabis sativa L. And any of the knowledge that we have, if we share together, we will have a better understanding. We will have a better language and a better ability to understand the very nature of this plant and its potential to save us all, frankly.
Absolutely. And let's not forget that it's not just cannabis that's facing these kind of issues. Like, let's look at what's happening in the world of fungi and mushrooms. There's a certain set of mushrooms that get you high, and actually they have incredible therapeutic and social benefit. Imagine if we were in a situation where, because these mushrooms get you high and they're regulated criminally, which I don't agree with, by the way. You couldn't buy button mushrooms from a farmer who wasn't licensed to grow them, or oyster mushrooms or reishi mushrooms, or some of these medicinal mushrooms now coming through. This is the next. I think mushrooms and fungi are the next cannabis and hemp. Hopefully they won't have to go through some of the same painful periods that the cannabis industry has had to go through, and hopefully it can happen much faster. But hopefully we can also get the corporate capture of it as well. And the more people, again, link all these things together, like all the pieces matter. Let's not become monocroppers of hemp as the solution to all the world's hemp and cannabis, the solution to all the world's problems. It's part of the picture. It's part of the mix. And at Hempen, we're permaculturalists. We believe it all matters. We believe the whole system matters, and we don't want to just say there's one solution. It's just a really important part of the bigger picture, and that's what we're working towards.
Yeah, we know you're right. Unfortunately, I don't want to kind of burst your bubble a bit, but anyone that's aware with sort of the work that I've done, I've been producing a weekly blog called Last Week in Weed, basically for the past year or so, where I keep an eye on sort of things going around. As part of that, I've been slowly building a lot of information within sort of the psychedelic or entheogenic investment sphere, as it were. And that is far more corrupt. They've learned the lessons of cannabis and they've gone faster and further. So the synthetic patents and compounds, they're actually then patenting therapies and various applications. So even before the consciousness, the collective consciousness of the public are aware of these things, they're going to have already had everything cemented. Right. So obviously we've got a couple of ketamine clinics in the UK. There's trials for ibogaine, for LSD, for DMT, for ketamine, for MDMA. There's probably a couple I'm missing off the top of my head, but they're active studies that are there's a lot of stuff that is really starting to come together in the UK, and it is for a corporate leaning stance. It's not about us. It's for that big pharma, as it were, to not lose their antidepressant market, to not lose their sedative market, to not lose, their antipsychotics market. So we can see what they're doing. We're quite aware of it. But the faster I think that we can unify and start to create our own wealth is the people, the vast, diverse people that consume cannabis. As you're saying, I look at my audience are not young people as people would think. They start in about their early 30s, but go right up to their 80s, according to our analytics. So we actually have quite a wealth of people that listen as well from quite a lot of countries around the world. And from conversations I've had with sort of a few people is they share the same sort of idea, and it transcends culture, it transcends religion, it transcends language. We all want the freedom, the autonomy to be able to utilize what is, I don't believe in God, but I'll use the expression God-given right. You know, these are our birthright. These were already here. These things exist. It is not for some person to arbitrarily come across and go, we can't control this or profit from it. We don't like what happens when you use it, so you're not allowed access to it. So I think that anybody that's interested in any part of ending this abhorrent draconian war on drugs in some small way, I guess, needs to support a hemp revolution, a hemp renaissance, because like I said, that if you guys are then fighting this and you're planting low THC cannabis and you're getting a victory, there is no difference then to fight why we can't plant high THC cannabis and do the same thing. So I think people need to recognize these, the allyship that we share. And again, I'm probably going to take some flack for this, but whatever, we have to communicate and find some form of unity and move forward. It's the only way forward. Not all of us are these monster venture capitalists. We're not all Patrick Bateman in the boardroom trying to push to own more and more of this shit. You know what I mean? Most of us just want an easy life. I frankly don't have to talk about drugs anymore. I want this to be over so I can just go do drugs and figure out what I was actually going to do with my life before I was forced into fighting to just be allowed to exist.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you've got my support. You've got my support, guys. And like I said, I'm not going to say don't say hemp. I'm just going to say that, as I hope I've articulated, I think that there is something of an unintended consequence that if we speak of the industrial potential of hemp, it kind of makes people think that cannabis doesn't. So I don't know, maybe I've planted a few seeds in your heads.
Well, luckily it's as simple as that. It's you know, if you support it, you just need to plant some seeds. Get yourself some seeds. You can get them from our website or you know, any organic hemp producer's website, but you know, they're there. Plant them in your garden. If you're feeling up for it, let us know. Let us know in public if you want to be part of the masses saying, hey, look, there's nothing wrong with this. If there's something wrong with this, tell us why, and we'll all have a big public discussion about it, because we can't find anything wrong with growing hemp. We can only find good benefits and good side effects. Mm-hmm. So yeah, grow hemp, overgrow the regime. Check us out at hempen.co.uk, and if you want to get really stuck in and get involved, we're going to need lawyers, we're going to need people making videos, people proficient in press and media, funding. All the rest of it is going to be needed so that we can really make this big. Send us an email to growhemp@hempen.co.uk and get involved. Join the campaign at the ground floor, and let's ride it all the way to the top.
Excellent. Well, I'll make sure to include the links in the bio below. I suppose all that's left is to ask you guys the final question that I ask all my guests, which is, what does the future hold for you guys? Which I suppose we've kind of covered quite a lot of it. It's going to be fighting the system, overgrowing the government.
Yeah, abundance of hemp all around across the UK, I think, is the vision that we definitely see. I definitely believe in, being the change and living the change. And I think that's why the campaign that we're just launching is coming from, because we're not going to stand for it anymore. And so, yeah, I believe that we're going to be supporting people to grow fields of hemp all across the UK, and we're going to be able to therefore supply different research and development into ways that hemp can propel the economy in a more regenerative and healing way that will help us out of this mess. So definitely, in terms of hemp, that's...
And we're going to be putting ourselves out of business, because we're going to be teaching people how to extract their own seed oil. You know, this is how you make the products. You know, if you want Hempen to make it, you can buy it from our website. But if you want to do it yourself, here's the video on how to do it. Come to the workshop. We're going to be doing that. And for all those big organic farmers out there, we're going to be putting together organic hemp agricultural co-op across the UK to supply so that all the farmers can support each other in producing really high quality organic agricultural scale hemp, so that all of the other industry uses can benefit at scale, and also so that all of those growers can benefit together, and it's not just creamed off the top by a corporation that buys it off them in the end. And that's why we're gonna help form and join that cooperative, and that's going to be coming up in the next year as well. So we've got the twin approach. We've got the scale approach for the industry and farmers, and we've got the grassroots people's approach for every grower and farmer out there that doesn't want to go through any licensing.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, as I said, I wish you the best of luck with this, guys. Hope to get you on in the not too distant future, and hope that I don't have to do this via one of you behind bars. But in all seriousness, I think that I respect what you're doing, and I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the fact that you came on to record this, and before we caveated the thing about low THC cannabis versus hemp sort of thing. I'm an ally, not an enemy. For all I may have accidentally painted myself as an enemy in the past. And I hope that a lot of my listeners will in some form recognize that actually, if you want a planet where you can roll a fatty and get high and watch the sunset or whatever, you're going to need hemp or low THC cannabis to sequester the carbon out of the air so you can breathe long enough to actually do it. So we have to recognize there is commonality here. It's not abandoning your fight, it's modifying and adapting your ideology, being less rigid within your worldview and trying to adapt to an ever-changing situation. And if you want to send me a message and have a go at me, you got my own details, guys. In
the end, hopefully, even our enemies will become our allies, and we won't waste time giving each other flack, and we'll just work out how to, transform our consciousness as one human race, like Bill Hicks suggested we should save time and get straight towards doing.
Hey, the giant pagan-esque mushy festival we're going to have at the end when Mordor is ripped up. It's going to be wonderful. I can't wait to see the juxtaposition of all of the classes, races, and different kind of subcultures of the UK just bond together. Because again, we're kept apart by these arbitrary distinctions that were created for racist and classist means to help perpetuate for ever increasing profits of industry. And they start to own more and need more and want more. And as you said quite eloquently sort of before, that the division served as well to allow the knowledge to metastasize, as it were, within the political body. And we are, I hate the analogy in that sense to say that we're a cancer, but I mean that we are as aggressive as a cancer. We are a brain cancer within the body politic in this country, and they cannot survive us. They're having to adapt and co-opt and form businesses and now become parts of bodies and CEOs within actual organizations. They're so transparent with this shit now. At least before they were just taking backhanders. They're learning that they have to adapt to survive within this. So if even they're adapting, then I'm sure everybody else can recognize, as I said, just the commonality. Just try to take a step back and go, if you are a therapeutic user, if you are somebody who just likes to get high as hell, if you are somebody that is interested in the potential industrial applications of this, you are not one against the other. There is no binary debate here. We are human beings on a dying planet with a resource that can save us if we can get past the ignorance that divides us.
Exactly.
I think that's an articulate way to end this podcast. I'm quite impressed with that one. That's where Macca would usually shout at me and go, you practice that. It's weird not having him jump in back and forth here, but we'll get him back next week. Anyway, folks, if you did enjoy this, please do check us out on, I've jumped straight to doing housework keeping. I even said thank you. Thank you very much to our guests this evening, who have been Patrick and Zena from Hempen. As I've said, you can find all of the links below in the bio, links to your website, and also that email address, growhemp@hempen.co.uk.
That's correct.
Yeah.
There you go. So do get involved in whatever way. And I'm sure that you guys don't have the facility to test if what they're growing is going to be 0.2 THC or 1.2 or 2.2. So overgrow the system, folks. Get involved in the fight. And yeah, check out Hempen.
Grow hemp.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We'll jump to housekeeping now. So if you did actually stick around for this and you've dealt with the car crash, it's been me trying to manage this without Mr. Macca. Please do check us out on patreon.com/Simpa Life, where for less than a cup of coffee a week, you can help us keep the lights on and help pay some of the debts that we've accrued from the festivals we're attending to record for you lovely folk over the next few weeks. Check us out on all social media at The Simpa Life. I've been Simpa. There is no Macca today. Thank you to my lovely guests, and I'll see you all next week. Peace and love, folks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.